Listeners, thanks for joining us today. Today we're in part 2 of our 5-step series on having an abundant social life. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about finding your people and give you some practical steps to building your friendship circle. And this is kind of the fun, right? This is in the work for some people, but I think hopefully you walk away with this and have ideas about where to find friends, how to find friends, and how to start fostering those relationships. All right, listeners, welcome back to the second episode in our series about making friends or having an abundant social life. And today we're going to just try and give you some practical steps to meeting people, initiating friendships, and making friends. And so that we can solve, we talked about last episode, John, you mentioned, I think it was 13, or in the past people had like 13 people they could talk to, and now it's 3, something like that. I got the numbers
12,
right?
12 to 3 is what I heard, but I don't.
Okay.
Who knows?
Close enough. 12 to 3.
Really good to really bad.
There we go. Yeah. So we're going to give some steps. But before we get into that, I gave you guys no preparation for that. I want to ask you an interview question that I ask this question of every person I ever interview. It's one of my favorite interview questions. So I'm going to ask both of you, Anthony, John.
Like for a job interview?
Yeah, job interview.
Well, I got to sweat here.
But it applies to, yes, correct.
Okay.
Here
we go.
A lot of pressure.
Whew.
Think of your best friend. Whoever it is, I don't care who it is. Doesn't matter who it is. Think of your best friend. John, we'll start with you. Why are they your best friend?
I mean, I immediately put my wife at the top of the list. Does that count?
Sure.
Why are they my best friend? She's my wife. She literally knows everything about me.
Because she'll have sex with you? Is that why?
Why would you assume she would? No, I mean, look, the truth is my wife is incredibly selfless. I feel like she really, in most cases, thinks about me before she thinks about her. She really loves me for who I am. And I feel, as close as I can get to unconditional love, I don't like, not that it's a blank check for me to act badly, but I don't think there's anything that I would do that would have her love me less.
Okay.
And so I think that I feel known, I feel cared for, I feel like she puts me first, like, not just the vast majority of the time, but I, can't think of when she doesn't. And which makes me wonder what the hell's wrong with her.
Well, Anthony and I have asked that question many times of her directly, and she just kind of rolls
It's really
her eyes.
just her choice in men.
She just rolls her eyes.
No, she's amazing as a partner, and she really is a great friend. Like, she is a really, really amazing friend, and she's, I don't think she thinks about it as being skillful at it, but she's really skillful at being thoughtful about other people, and she truly cares, and she does things. She'll do things because she thinks they're good for our relationship or good for me, even though it may take work for her.
Anthony, same question.
It'd be easy to say the same thing, and it's true, in terms of a marriage. But, to answer the question in the context of what we're talking about here in terms of developing and maintaining, friends outside the family, the person that comes to mind for me is the antithesis of Anthony, literally the opposite religion, opposite health-wise, opposite politically. We've both gone through some really difficult times in our lives. I mean, really difficult times, as difficult as you can get. And at the time of each other's, at different times, we both were there for that person in a myriad of ways, financially, physically, emotionally. And we just, it's kind of it's an odd pairing. You would never have guessed that these two guys would end up this way, but we have. And we just, I haven't talked to him in 6 months. I owe him a call based on this whole discussion we're having. So
Probably at the break.
Yeah, I'll probably call him on the way home tonight. But we just know we're okay.
Yeah. Okay. Love it. So I love that as an interview question because it really tells me about people and what they value, what they look for, and gives me insights into the person. I would encourage people listening to ask themselves that same question, because it also tells you and gives you an insight into yourself, into what you value and what you're looking for in a friend. So,
Well, and aside from marriage, I'd say that I also have a couple of buddies like that, like, when the chips are down, like, it doesn't matter what time of day, it doesn't matter what the issue is, doesn't matter. Like, I call one of those two people and they'll show up, and vice versa. And we have, and we will, and
right.
it just doesn't change. And good in a crisis, like in one case, I mean, do you want a story about this?
Sure, go ahead.
So I was, my mom was in the hospital. She'd had respiratory failure. The hospital had her on a drug she was allergic to and had to move her to a different facility. She was in California. I was in California with her. I live in Texas. And I wanted to oversee her care and recovery, but that meant bringing her to Texas. Well, the problem was she was intubated and, the machine was breathing for her. And so I called a buddy of mine who was a pilot. I was like, hey, man, I need some help. And he went out and found a way to get her from California to Austin and had it all set up for me. And so we literally had her transported, from California to Austin in a really vulnerable state. And she was 100 days in the hospital when she got here. And then she recovered, got out of the hospital, had an amazing next 7 years that she wouldn't have had otherwise. And, but that was a tall ask for a friend. Like, I need you to find me something that's going to be damn near impossible to find. I'm not even sure exactly what I'm asking for. And he went out and said, okay, here's how we do it. And it was just an incredibly complex project and set of information in an area that he's not, doesn't work in healthcare. And it was just like, dropped everything.
Yeah. Okay.
He runs a company. Like it wasn't like he didn't have work to do. He has a family, kids. Like he's the busiest guy.
Right. So I think that's great, right? That's the real friend we were talking about last episode,
yep.
right? People you can actually count on when the chips are down. And if we go back to when we were kids, or just maybe a better thing for people our age is watch kids, they make friends really easily.
Friend will tell you, put your little closer to the mic. You got to get in there and let's talk about
All
it.
right.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. All right.
I want to hear this.
But kids make friends easily, right? You put a bunch of kids together, and all of a sudden they just naturally play together and make friends. But it gets harder as we get older, right? We all agree with that?
I don't know if making friends is easy as kids, but I think the friendships from childhood that persist because people were put into a situation with high amounts of time and experience together. And I haven't watched a playground lately. My kids are, my youngest is 14, but I think when you put people in a shared set of experiences for long periods of time, it's natural that friendships would develop. And so when you have a highly transitory workforce and people, go away to college and then go to another city for work, maybe it's not the same thing as being in a class all day and then the playground and then after school and then in activities together, where you have this high intensity period where you're also forming and growing your brain, you're forming and growing your, how you adapt emotionally to the world. Like, all these things are happening. And so it's natural to understand why friendships would come out of that in many cases. I don't have a ton of deep, close personal relationships from my upbringing. My deep, close personal relationships were formed in my adulthood, but I've had a couple people from my childhood reach out and reconnect with me lately. We had lots of those shared experiences, and it's been just fantastically well received on my part that they would reach out. And I'm hoping to rekindle more of those acquaintances because it's a great experience, but there are differences for sure in terms of when you start the relationship, my perspective.
Do you agree with that, Anthony?
I do. I'm watching a 7-year-old in first grade, and the transformation from a little guy to a social butterfly. But he is picking friends. Who's your best friend? And in his case, it's, this one particular boy and one particular girl, and he's gravitated to them, and he's doing, he wants to visit them in their home. They want to visit. It's happening. He's making it happen because that's what he wants, and it's clearly a need. it's a physical and emotional need for him to have somebody close to him that he can trust. It's really fun to watch, actually.
But when you watch, when you watch your grandkids, if you just, whether it's him or one of the other grandkids, and you just took them to a playground with no kids they know, what happens? But there's a whole group of kids there, and you just drop them off in the playground. What happens?
Well, it depends on the kid, because they do act differently. Some kids aren't ready to join the group. They're intimidated. Others, just dive right in. So I have the littlest one will dive into the middle of anything. The other two, they're kind of watching, feeling. They might get on the slide or on the monkey bars. Can we say that? I think you can still say monkey bars.
You can here.
You can, and be a participant up there, but not necessarily interact with other kids.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to watch. But in the school environment, it seems different. I don't know why that is, but
parenting's changed too, right? Like, I mean, I see kids right now who want their parents to be their entertainment. Whereas, we've talked about this on the show before. We'd hop on our bikes at daylight and we'd be gone until, the sun went down. Yeah. And now for, reasons that are in some places understandable, there's less of that. And I see kids often want their parents to entertain them versus kind of being out in the neighborhood running around. So I think there's some, no value judgment about which one's better or worse, but things are different.
Yeah, I'm going to take the other side of that argument and say that I think the parents want their kids to entertain them. They are so focused in making sure that little Johnny is the best piano player and soccer player and gymnast in the world, and
there's that
they're
too.
Bombing him around to everything, and the kid is whipsawed from one thing to the other, and by the time he's 8, he's going to be disinterested in all of those things. So I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of this isolation caused by the parents.
And then parents want to be the best friend in some cases too, which is
absolutely.
Like, we talk about like, there's a time when it's appropriate to distance the child from the parents. The child can grow into that independence we talked about last episode. And some parents are probably unknowingly or not intentionally stunting that.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a stat somewhere recently, and I don't remember the exact number, so it's kind of like just directional, but like first job, like, Anthony, your generation was like 14 years old. Mm-hmm. First job average age, like my generation was like 16 or 17. Now it's like 24.
Wow.
And again, the numbers aren't right, but they're directional. That just says something.
Anthony's generation kids were getting married at that age, in fairness.
Yes. Easy does it.
Much younger
not
than
quite.
That.
We might have been, well, it could be true.
That's
all right, Anthony's not quite
riding into the wedding ceremony on dinosaur back.
All right. Let's transition this a little bit. Do you think making friends isn't an intentional act? Oh, silence in the room.
I was thinking I'm hanging out with you two. Hell yeah, it is.
So,
yeah, I've never asked that question. I've never positioned that in any way, and I would have to answer, no, it's not an intentional act. In my case, anyway, it happens over time, and it suddenly becomes apparent that that's the case. And it's not an intentional, well, I like this guy, I'm going to make him a friend. Or I like her, I'm going to make her a friend. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work that way.
So tell me more about how it does work.
It's more, to me, it's like an awakening. You find yourself in sets of circumstances over time. You're a product of your environment. It can be both. It can be God and Darwin, right? So it doesn't have to be one or the other. So let's stick with the Darwin side of things. You just evolve in time, right? You go through situations. You're presented with, difficulties or enjoyable opportunities, and things evolve from there, and you find common ground with somebody, or uncommon ground that you both find enjoyable to be on the opposite. As in the case of my buddy in Chicago, where couldn't be more different, and it's kind of fun. I really look forward to the dialogue and the arguing. And
I
then
mean, can I go?
martinis.
It depends though. Like I think there are people like I think about young adults moving cities who want to have a social group who don't have one. Like I've seen people that are really intentional about going out and making friends, and I remember my grandparents, having bridge club at their house where they'd set up like I can't remember the number of card tables, and they'd have like 20 or 30 people come over and they'd play bridge, and that was a really intentional way of meeting new people, drawing them into the social crowd. And I think there's some people that have like a country club type of thing to do, and there are other people that want to there's a sports and social club here in Austin where you make and so I think the answer really is it depends. Sometimes you have to be more intentional in a new place, new environment. Sometimes it happens really naturally. And I think in my experience, the natural ones are the ones that tend to last, and you don't see them coming, but I do think that people can be intentional about it too.
Right. So we want to be careful in this discussion when we ask the question about friends, because when you ask the question about friends, I was thinking about the 5. What you're referring to is the social network,
Yeah, that's right.
the friendships,
That's
and so forth, which absolutely is intentional and and very healthy to have that network, and becomes even and you're the doctor, but the science around aging and having a social network is pretty important for someone to maintain those things as they age, because mentally and physically, it's very important. So,
By the way, just so you guys know, before I asked that question, I kind of asked myself how I thought the two of you were going to answer. And I felt Anthony was going to say, no, it's not intentional. I actually thought John would be a little stronger on the fact that it is intentional. And I'm not making any judgment. I'm not making a judgment that one's right or wrong or better or worse.
I'm right.
I'm
just kidding.
I didn't want to say it.
I actually don't see it that way,
but that's your personalities, right? I mean, you guys are, well, there's plenty of similarities. That's also your personality. John, you're much more intentional about creating doing that. And
that's
and
true, but let's talk about why that is though, Randy. Hold on.
Well, again, I'm not making a judgment, and for the purpose of this episode, we are going to get into intentionally cultivating.
Yeah, for sure.
That is a big part of this episode. I tend to be more like Anthony, where, it wasn't intentional, but as I think about it, I think, okay, what situations could I put myself in where I could have been more intentional and more strategic about it?
Yeah.
Had I thought about it. I just don't think I ever consciously thought about it growing up.
I found myself in a really super isolated position though, like almost 20 years ago. And when I was going through evaluating that with a therapist about why I had set, and frankly, it was a situation of my own making where I had blown up, every relationship around me, in a very poor, thoughtless kind of way of objectifying people in my life. And I had to get really honest about that. And so for me, it was about being intentional about not making that same mistake again and again and trying to learn from it. And because I had done so much damage, and thank God my family allowed me to recover from that and they were graceful, and thank God my friends have been great. But there are people that, knew me early in my life that probably wouldn't recognize me in that same way in a lot of ways. And so the intentionality for me wasn't about personality as much as it was about I was just doing what was natural, and it was fairly destructive, and I had to and that goes all the way back to emotional vulnerability from we talked about that in the last episode. I wasn't emotionally available for a period of time because my dad passed away and I didn't handle it very well. And so, and the reason I share that story is because there's hope. Like no matter where you are, if you're not intentional and you want to be, or if you're super intentional, which you didn't have to be, I don't think there's a right answer that is hey, this is the way you do it.
Right.
I think it's if you want something different than what you have, if all this friendship stuff sounds great and you're not getting it, it's something that can be learned. It's not a...
Well, I think what we're talking about today a lot is if we we want strategies so that we can put ourselves in position to give ourselves the best possible chance of meeting those people, whether they're the more acquaintance people or ideally the 5, as Anthony Anthony refers to them. So let's talk about that. Where do you find potential friends? Like what is a place, an environment, a group? Where would you go to look, or what would you tell a listener?
I'd say it's different based on where you are in your life. And I think that it's really easy early in life, and it can be in some circumstances easier later in life if you're looking at like some of the like like independent living facilities where you move. Like my grandparents lived in a place called Leisure World, where it was all people over 55, very similar socioeconomic, histories, and they found it really easy to make friends there, and they had clubs they were a part of, and they did all the same activities and that kind of thing. And I think that's similar to like being in a school where you have this environment where it's hyper designed, to create that supportive environment. I think it's in the middle where it gets tough. I think about college today can be more difficult to meet people than it is in some colleges, and colleges work really hard to get people into those groups for sure. And I think they do a better job of it today than they ever have, but it's still hard. And then you talk about early career, mid-career, like you have kids. You remember when you had kids, I mean, it was really hard to meet new friends. And if they weren't the kids' friends' parents or school PTA, it's really hard to break out of your work and school circles. But we have friends with young kids right now in school, and it's hard to get time with them.
Okay. Yeah. And, when do you do it? How much time do you have to devote to it? I look at my my son. They're in they're in tech. Let's call it tech, and the amount of hours that they put in on a daily basis. I mean, I can't imagine him being in a position to make a new friend for some time to come. In his case, he's got his college buddies that they maintain, really good relationships with. So he's fortunate in that way. But for the next some number of years, that's what he's going to have, because he's got no time. He and his wife have no time. They have 2 kids. They'll have some acquaintances on the soccer field.
Right.
But they're not going to, I can't imagine them making friends because they just don't have time.
But in that case, I assume there's friends that he works with.
They're both remote.
Oh, okay.
They're both remote. And so that's what I'm saying. And they work like, I mean, I worked hard. I mean, but they're making me look like I didn't work. They're working 12 straight hours every single day. I mean, they're just on it. So they barely have time to get their kids to their soccer or t-ball, and
so
then they're bombing home to feed them dinner and get them to bed.
Yeah.
And
okay. So we're adding on almost from last episode the problem. Let's give people solutions. If somebody wants to solve this problem.
Yeah, I think let's start with like college age, right? Like college age, most schools today have a whole lot of like social activities, and they have like entry points into that. And so you can get everything from like student associations to affinity associations, like, ski club, scuba club, intramural sports. Like there's a ton to get involved with. And so that really is about choosing where to get involved and then just staying engaged until you find your group. So I think college can feel difficult because of some of the pandemic stuff people are experiencing, but it's a fertile, rich environment for those types of relationships. Even commuter schools have special commuter clubs. And so I'd say the college, that's, there are people having difficulty, but it's not difficult. And they've got, all types of resources for people. And so that would be kind of there. When someone's in their 20s and 30s, I think that's when you have, you got to find what hobbies you're in, and look for affinities, right? And so you can find, do you love bowling? Dancing is a big one I hear from people right now. Like I had a friend call me yesterday. He goes to dance classes several times a week,
right.
And so if you enjoy games, there's places to do games.
Where would you go?
Where would I? I went to entrepreneurs groups because I liked hanging out with people that were doing the entrepreneurial things that I was doing. And so there were a number of entrepreneurship groups that I was a part of in one way or another that really helped me to find kind of like-minded people.
Right.
And then, plug for Dungeons and Dragons. Like I like to play Dungeons and Dragons, which is going to shock, I think, a lot of listeners. There's a vulnerable moment that people are going to try to hold against me, but you can't because I love it so much. And I've played with CEOs of companies. I've played with I've played with brand new players. I've played like the whole like, and it's something I enjoy. And so I've got a group of people that I play with. But it's an easy way to find other people to hang out with that are like-minded and have fun. And it it cuts across all socioeconomic groups play the game. And so that but there's also board games like like playing board games. And so if I was just you know looking for, if I was single, not, but that's one of the things I would do. And then with my wife, if we wanted to, we'd find something we want to do in common, right? So there's a travel club here in Austin, and that we have not joined yet because we still have kids at home and we want to focus there. But when our youngest moves out, we'll go join this travel club. And so it's about finding things to do in common with people. And yeah, that's
So Anthony and John, nobody knows this, but they met at a Dungeons and Dragons gathering.
That couldn't be further from the truth.
Anthony hasn't played yet.
I will not do that.
Doesn't even know what it is.
I don't know what it is. I don't care. It just, but in answering your question, I think there's two important aspects of that need to be discussed as you get a little older and time becomes the barrier. One is to be part of associations in your industry. So if you're an architect, go to your AIA meetings.
That's
or
right.
remodeler meetings or whatever the case may be, because they're like-minded people, and your odds of being on the same page with people are better. But as important to that, and I think this is often forgotten, and certainly is something that I failed at. Nurture the damn relationships that you had. Right?
Yeah.
Keep those alive. I mean, there are several, people you lose touch with, and then you wonder, gee, it's been so long. What should I do?
Call them on their birthday.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It turns out that even though I haven't spoken to Jay in 6 months, it's going to be like I talked to him this morning when I get him on the phone.
Those are great.
So nurture those relationships and keep them alive. Because they'll be there. They'll be better. You'll advance them in terms of the deepening of the relationship. And a simple phone call or text message, or hey, did you see the game last night of that sports team that you guys are affiliated with? That's as important as anything in keeping that network alive, and also in helping you. If you're in trouble, and you reach out and you don't get the answer you were looking for, you can also then, make plans.
Yeah. In preparing for this, I was, this isn't something I'd ever given much thought to, right? I just never had strategy in it, and things kind of happened, right? But all three of us, I think it should be noted, have been driven in a lot of our relationships. John mentioned entrepreneurial and people we worked with. And I was even thinking a lot of the good relationships. I've got multiple people like Anthony's talking about that were good friends that I don't talk to them very often. But when we do, like you said it perfect, right? You just pick up like nothing's ever changed. I was in Orlando a few weeks ago and met with my friend Lou, who I hadn't talked to in probably a year or more. And we went to dinner, and it was as if we talked yesterday, right? But
and if someone doesn't have that, Randy, I think, you talked about trade groups and industry groups. I think just as important, like there are tons of volunteer opportunities in local communities where it fosters relationships. Like Big Brothers Big Sisters is a great one here in Austin, or the Rotary Club is international and has locations everywhere. And the cool thing about Rotary is I can go to, as a Rotarian, any Rotary Club in the world and have lunch or dinner with any local club, and they'll welcome you as if you've been a member for 20 years at that local club. And so churches have, age group, usually groups for all different ages. And so I think anytime you can invest time and energy into something that's not yourself, I think you do a good job to kind of reduce isolation.
Yeah, and then I think it's like-minded people, right? And that's what I was thinking. For us, it tends to all be that a lot of it is career, business-wise, right?
So, yeah, I'm just going to...
But whether it is, like you said, it could be people that just They bond over feeding the homeless.
In a bout of irony here. So we're sitting in a soundproof booth, and there's a group of people outside at a crawfish boil. Hope you can't hear them. There's like 70 of them coming to get crawfish at our time, 4:00 on a Thursday. Yeah. This is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like when someone says, come to a crawfish boil, and by the way, I don't think they all work for the same company. I think it's like vendors and friends. It's like, just say yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been one of my rules. I just try to say yes when it comes to things about people when I can.
Yeah. So finding, I know when I first moved to Austin, I was thinking back, I didn't really have an intentional plan, but I liked to play football. And I knew right away. So I went and I found football leagues, and I just naturally bonded with those people. But when I was thinking about it, all the friends that I made playing football, they're not the people that once I stopped playing football, a lot of those friendships have suffered, even though they're around me.
Yeah.
It's more for me. I think I guess what I'm getting at, it's figuring out who it is you really align with, your beliefs, your values, is figuring out who that 5 is, or who those really good friends are, and who you stick with over the years.
Going in for the 5 is kind of like walking up to someone, and saying, do you want to get married, as the first opening line.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's the right approach. I think it's about building that network, building that kind of, group of people more broadly. And then people will come in and out of the different levels of closeness in your life. But I do think it's weird. Like, hey, my name's John. What's your name? You will be best friends forever. 50, 80 years of commitment right now. What do you say? It's just weird.
Yeah. So, look, I my takeaways from this is figure out what it is that you're into. What do you really like?
Yeah.
And go meet like-minded people, regardless of what it is.
And do it for building the broader network, not to find your 5. Like, you'll find your 5 eventually, but that's going to take time. Like, time on the water is how you deal with that. And so
let's talk about if somebody's an introvert, because we have people listening that this is uncomfortable as hell, right? If you're an introvert, going to an event and talking to people and saying, hi, my name's Randy, scares some of these, that's terrifying for some people, right? And maybe not terrifying. Some people it's terrifying. For more people, it's just highly uncomfortable, and they'd rather not do it. So what would you tell those people?
I mean, the things I tell people all the time are ask people how long you've lived in the current city. Like, how long have you lived here? What do you like? Right? What brought you here? I think those are interesting questions. And as importantly, a question you can ask someone so that you can get out of the conversation is, who are you here to meet that I could introduce you to? Because there are times that I've been at network. I'm pretty outgoing, but there have been times I'm like, okay, this isn't going that well, and we're getting close to awkward. And so I just say, well, who could I introduce you to? And even if I don't know the person, I'll walk up and, oh, hey, this is, and let them in. And that way I can very just nicely extricate myself from that situation.
Yeah. I'm thinking, John and I have gone to some of the same networking groups, and I'm thinking, Andrew's Gathering of Friends in particular.
Yeah.
John and I couldn't have different strategies, right? John has a system, and he is going to go in, he's going to meet everybody there. And me given my own, this is not an effective by the way, this is not advice for how to network. I go in, I talk to one person, and I would rather just talk to 1, 2, 3 people over the course of an hour or two and get to know them, right? And John's going to meet everybody there. It's you go there on a mission and figure it out. And then, but you and I met in a similar type situation, and then there was a follow-up, right? Like, you're going, oh, this person's interesting, let's have coffee.
Yeah, usually I go in and say, I want to meet 2 people that I find interesting, and then I've got enough energy for 2 people I find interesting, and then I excuse myself. So it's not everyone, because that's too much. I just usually try to go in, I try to meet 2 people that I find interesting that I think would be nice to have coffee with as a follow-up, and once I've hit my number, I go home.
Okay. All right. Anthony, what would you tell people that are introverts? You got advice? Because, again, I think this is a real problem for a lot of people.
I'm not sure that, I don't consider myself introverted, but I find those situations you're talking about very difficult. I don't know why that is, because once I get going, I'm fine. But, that opening, break, there's a group of 3 people, you're alone. How do you break into that conversation without being an idiot? Right. So I find that difficult. So to John's point, the opening question of, so what do you do when you're not drinking that martini? Is kind of the way I always
That's a great one.
break the ice. Do you have family in town? And, the idea is to ask them about them, get them talking. And then they'll usually ask you questions, and now things are alive.
By the way, back to the first episode, cliche first,
Yep.
facts second, don't delve into opinions early because that's just weird.
Yep.
I had an Uber driver who dove right into politics with us, and we were like 30-minute ride to the airport. Could not have been more uncomfortable. And I gave him every signal like, hey, bud, this is not going well for you. And he didn't take any of the off-ramps. It was very uncomfortable.
Well, I like Anthony. It's ask them about that. You both mentioned it, right?
Yes.
But Anthony just said it a little more directly. Is ask them, and so I think if you're an introvert, I think the problem for a lot of people is they're like, what am I going to talk about? And they're worried about that. But you just be curious in other people, and people have an interesting story.
Yeah.
And if you ask and you dig, not all of them, by the way, some of them, like you said, you're going to want to get away from, but if you ask other people, you don't have to worry about what you talk about.
I use that line or a line like it on the golf course when I'm playing with three people I don't know. I say, so when you're not shanking it into the woods, what do you do for a living? You try to, you want to have a little bit of humor at the beginning. It's not not everything has to be, so cold, right? You want to be, again, open that vulnerability a little bit.
On the flip side, don't if you're selling something, don't make it a pitch. Like, I can't tell you the number of times people jump right into their pitch. And I am so, look, and I grew up, I cut my teeth in sales, and nothing is more off-putting than someone who's like, oh man, I got this, you is the greatest. I was like, oh, I'm here to play golf, or I'm here to, meet people, or I'm here to, I am not here to see your pitch deck.
Yeah.
So I would say, I genuinely want to hear about other people because I'm genuinely, and that's it. You got to be genuinely interested. One person asked me one time, they were, I think they wanted to be a client of mine, and they're like, well, teach me, how do I get someone to think I care about them? I was like, that's really easy. You care about them.
Right. Yeah. Cause people see through it.
Oh yeah.
People think they can trick, and it's like people can see right through it.
Yeah.
All right, let's approach the mindset a little bit, and I think there's some good strategies. All right, we talk about them, the humor, all this stuff, but I think a lot of people psych themselves out before they get to that point. So what would you tell people if it's just to overcome that mindset of fear or whatever it is that just makes them not engage at all?
I had a piece of paper once that somebody gave me about networking because I didn't understand what networking meant at one point in my career. And they had what are your goals, personally and professionally? Not that you would go in and say, hi, I'm John, here are my goals personally. But it was like, oh, okay. That's, people won't find that interesting, but they might find that interesting. And then how I like to ask, how can I help? I love going to meet someone and listen for anything I could do to be helpful to them. And when I say helpful, I don't mean how could I sell them my product. What I mean is genuinely, is there somebody in my network I can introduce them to? Is there some way that they're looking for value that I could add to their day? Right? It's not about how do I help them with my thing so that I get help. It's like, how could I genuinely be helpful to them?
Yeah, I think the other thing is if somebody really has that fear and anxiety, it's put yourself in a position where it's going to be easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be going back to something you're really interested in. Look, yesterday I went to a networking event. It was a combination. It was supported by Austin University, which I think is a fascinating new educational system. And we'll have some people on here in the future talking about that. Here in town, it's the country's newest university, and it was Bitcoin related. Everybody I talked to was interesting, right? Because I'm interested in Bitcoin, so there's almost no chance I'm not going to find them interesting. And the whole Austin University and trying to change education,
counter establishment, it's not like you at all,
right? So I put myself in. So I'm pretty uncomfortable, kind of like Anthony, just getting started in those things, even though I do well in them. But I don't even think I thought about it. right? Because everybody there was pretty like-minded. And
By
it
the
was, it, I mean, I was set up for success, and it just, the fear just, I don't know if I have fear as much as it's just discomfort, but it was non-existent because I put myself in the right setting.
Probably surprised both of you. I think both of you say that I'm the most comfortable in that setting. Probably surprised both of you to know that I don't love it. Like I like it relative to some other things that I dislike more, and I do really genuinely like people. Like that's true. But like going and like putting yourself out there for the first introduction, even for me, that's a very high energy expenditure. And so I'm not sure that surprises either one of you. But it's a high energy deal.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't surprise me. But you use a system to overcome that anxiety.
That's because I'm not naturally talented. I use a system for things because I don't have much talent. I have to outwork and outthink people because of my lack of natural ability.
We work with someone that we know really well that is like the bon vivant of these type of events. I mean, he'll walk into the room and, he's the center of attention. Immediately, he has a memory that of people and their kids and names like I've never seen before. I've just never seen anything like it. I think he's an outlier. I just don't think there are many people quite like that.
Yeah.
So it's a job to do this, and you have to look at it as a job. It's not going to be easy. Whether it's a crawfish boil outside, you still have to break the ice. You have to work at it, and you're not going to make 31 acquaintances, and you're not going to have 31 coffees the next day. If you find one or two that, hey, let's get a tea time, or let's talk about this volunteer opportunity. Next week, what's your number? I'll give you a call. I mean, that's what it.
And by the way, I don't know who the crawfish boil is or for, but my guess is that like of the 70 or so people they said were coming, 30 or 40 of them probably know each other. So if you can get into a place where you've got a group that's already you're well integrated into, and then meet a few, my guess is that's a whole lot easier than going to a group where it's your first. Like I went to a group recently where my first time ever, and I did just talk to the person who invited me and nobody else, and it was pretty, like it was a pretty high energy, like, and it wasn't like, and that happens. So I think if you can find groups, and you asked about how you do it, like so when you have kids, I think you lean into the educational programs of your kiddos because that's where you're going to spend such a huge amount of your time outside of, work. And then I think past that you look at like the affinity, whether it's church or scuba diving or golf or wherever you're going to find people that have they spend time the way you want to spend time.
Let's use that as a chance to go to break. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about, okay, you've made a connection. What's next? And we'll pick that up when we get back from the break. All right, listeners, welcome back. So before the break, we talked about just how to meet people. So we're going to assume at this point, even if you have fear, anxiety, you've overcome that. You've went out, you found somebody that's like-minded that you want to get to know better. At this point, you're not best friends. There's no pressure to be best friends, but you need to find out, can this person be a best friend, or can they, what kind of friend can they be? So let's talk about going from the hello to the hangout. John, we mentioned in the first half, you and I met, and from there it went into, we went and had coffee, right? Or we had lunch. I think maybe it was lunch.
Yeah, but we were part of a group that we saw each other regularly, and I love the idea. And this is where, like, whether it's a church group or a business industry event or a boys and girls club, or there's places that keep putting you in the same room over and over again, and that's really low stakes. Right. It's really easy because you just show up, somebody else is organizing it, maybe you get a drink, maybe you're listening to the music in the background. But I used to be part of a lot of networking events earlier in my career where I just show up and we'd see the same people over and over again, and that's a very low intensity way to start, really. And that's how we started.
But it could be that. But it also could be that you just meet somebody and you think, I would like to get to know this person.
Happens
better,
all the
right?
time. Yeah.
So
also,
it could be going to lunch. It could be coffee. What else? Tell me what are the next steps? So let's take it to that next level. Like, how do you now strengthen or begin the friendship, I guess, really, right? Like start going to the next stage.
For me, it's about how I can help somebody. It's like, I had someone reach out to me recently who I've met a couple times. They wanted to jump on a quick call for like a virtual coffee. And it was really just about like, how can I help you? And so there's probably a couple connections I can make for them. That'll be good for them. Awesome. But it's really low stakes. It's not like, hey, I'm going to introduce you to a sales opportunity. It's just, hey, here's some people that you should know. And so I think that's one way. I think, and just shared time together, yeah. So I think, yeah, getting back into the room.
Let's talk about things you guys, Anthony, what have you done that's worked? Like what have you done over the years?
So the way I've always looked at it, and this might not work for anybody else, but what's the subject of interest that we now have, and going layer by layer into that particular subject. So it may be, golf. It may be some sort of event, or to become involved in a particular charity. That's how we ended up doing all the meals for the homeless. We met somebody and got us going through that. So you just start digging on the subject, and along with that comes almost organically the personal stuff. You start learning personal things about people, and that's where you can then maybe an opportunity to help, right? Because now you're starting to put the pieces together of this individual's life, their business life, their personal life, their general interest. Now there's an opportunity to help someone. If you can help somebody or help someone in their family, you're really starting to accelerate the relationship. And so that's how I think about it is, what's the subject, and then just let that snowball pick up slowly. And it's got to be slow. It can't be, you're not just getting to a finish line. And in fact, there is no finish line.
Yeah, that's right.
In a relationship. There's really no finish line.
But it's different with everybody, right?
Yeah.
Well, but you find your thing. Like, remember, before the pandemic, I used to have Sunday Fun Day at my place where I had a core group of friends that we got together every Sunday about 2:00, and it was a BYO dinner. At first, I just brought barbecue every week, and people got sick of barbecue because it was too many weeks in a row. And then it became kind of a BYO dinner, and then people started asking if they could just insert the blank, and the answer was sure, invite whoever you want. It's just an open door. And so eventually it went from being like 8 or 10 people to being 15 or 20 on a regular basis, and it was the same 8 or 10 every week. And then whoever got invited you showed up to a few of them, and yeah, it was just like whoever. And that's another like easy way for somebody to try to bring somebody else into, and it was a really easy environment because when somebody came to Sunday Fun Day for the first time, everyone knew to draw them in. It's like, hey, what do you want to eat? And, we had everyone was swimming, and there was kids, and so I think that kind of thing where you just have like that was my way of making it really easy.
Yeah. I know for me, some of it's business things and you just do things together, but sports has been a big thing in my life, right? If you're on a team, that's a super easy, it almost just happens naturally, right? You're on a team, you work together. I used to go to tournaments, sometimes national tournaments with teams, and you travel together. You're almost forced into that interaction, right?
Yep.
I mean, traveling, by the way, really going on a trip with somebody, you really get to know that person pretty fast.
Yep.
Right. I always say if somebody's dating, I think going on at least a 1-week trip should be part of the almost required.
I don't know if it's an early part or not, but
well,
we could. I think it's a great way to get to know how well you're compatible. It's a great way to know.
It's a different thing, but the same thing happens with friends, maybe to a lesser extent, right?
It's funny, the two buddies I told you about earlier, who were like my two, we in 2006 went on our first trip together, and we've been going on a trip at least every year. We've done most major holidays together almost every year, and all over the world. Yeah, it's been a really great experience.
Yeah. One thing we haven't talked about, and maybe we can save it for the next episode, is what are the blockages that your existence puts up to make it even more difficult. So if you're in a relationship with somebody, we talk about, well, go to this meeting and meet people and go have a coffee. Well, if you've got a partner, you got to weigh the time that you're giving up with that partner, and you got to have the grace of that partner to go do this. So let's not, maybe we'll put that off to some other time, but it's something you've got to think about and be conscious of, because while you're building up this new relationship, you could be destroying the old one without knowing it. So, or maybe your partner is happy with what she has or he has as is, and isn't interested in expanding. And, so I think you got to weigh those two things.
Yeah, it's balance, right? I mean, we have the 5 F's that we talk about, and I think this is a big problem. I mean, sometimes if you spend more time on friends, you're going to spend less time on
something else.
It might be family.
Yeah.
It might be, I mean, friends, maybe fun goes up at the same time, but it might be fitness, it might be finance. Something's going to struggle.
Oh, by the way, it might be friends and family. Like maybe you're making couple friends,
right?
Or like. Yeah. It takes work. Look, I would say this. I don't think it happens by accident in certain stages of life. I think in the stages where you're super busy with kids or kids are getting older, I think those phases, in my experience in particular, if you want to develop new friendships, for me, it's required a deliberateness that wasn't the same earlier on. It takes more work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it does for a lot of people, right? So, look, listeners, if you're having troubles making friends, realize you're not alone. Get out there, figure out where is your tribe. I think this would be my thing is like, where are your people and what are the common likes and belief systems, and where put yourself in a place where you're set up for success, and then just get out there. Don't force it. Let it happen organically and see where it goes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And try a little.
Yeah. Anything you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, you're a good person. You're an interesting person. Act like it. It'll happen. You just sitting at home, whacking a keyboard is not gonna result in a social network that you're gonna want to be part of.
Yeah, and the other thing we probably didn't hit on. I think people are like, I want those 5 friends that Anthony's talking about. I want them real 5. And that might take a lifetime, or it takes you find those people slowly over time. Like you have to, you got to break a lot of eggs to make an omelet here, right?
No doubt about it.
So
and we get into that when we talk about the phases of friendship. Yeah. We'll come back to that one. Yeah, it's great.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up. By the way, next episode in this series is going to be Nurturing the Bond, the Art of Maintaining Meaningful Friendships.
And tell us how to find more information about this.
Download the podcast wherever, Spotify, Apple, Google, iTunes, just wherever it is that you go, or YouTube, iTunes. Go to our website, talesofabundance.com. There's also a bunch of free tools on there. But again, download, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your neighbors, whatever you got to do. Give us 5 stars. We appreciate the support.
Absolutely.
Listeners are what make this possible. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to everybody next time.